Welcome back to Handmade with Holly. My name is Holly Michelson. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Del Mar, New York, just outside of Albany. Today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable spinner card with a whole farm on one card here on the spinning wheel. So this is super easy to do if you have the Give It a Whirl die set, and we're going to feature the Peekaboo Farm stamp set. We will be using some other miscellaneous products today. I'll point those out as I go along. Today will also be a great lesson in using your Stampin Blends to get a lot of shade and dimension when you're coloring your farm animals. So for paper today, we're going to need a half sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. So I cut this at 5.5, and then I scored it at 4 1/4. And this is just going to make a standard card base that I'm sure you're familiar with already. I also have a sheet that is matting layer size. This is 5 1/4 by 4, and I'm going to use this inside the card so that we can add another animal and a sentiment. It'd be difficult to stamp a sentiment on the black unless we were using the craft white ink. I also have a piece of designer series paper. This started off as 4 by 5.5, but I did use one of the dies from the Give It a Whirl set to already pre-cut this just to save us a little bit of time. And don't worry about the measurements. I'll be sure to list all of those in the comments for today's video. Then I also recommend that you have some scrap basic white paper that you can use for things like your sentiment, if you want to make the potted flowers or create out the farm fence. All of those can come out of your paper scraps. Then I have a little scrap of smoky slate. This is actually an edge when I cut down a matting layer, so I just decided to grab one of these strips from my stash and use it to accent behind my label. And then I have a small scrap of smoky slate that I have attached to an adhesive sheet, and you can see I've been cutting a number of arrows out from that. What's great, once you put the adhesive sheet on the paper, this becomes a self-sticking piece of cardstock, and you'll notice I use that to make a little arrow right here to let the recipient know to turn the card. I do recommend that when you cut out your wheel, make sure that you're using thick basic white cardstock for the wheel. This wheel is going to get a lot of action, and so I think you want to make that as sturdy as you can using the thick basic white cardstock. I did want to talk about this designer series paper that I used for the front of the card. This is actually Christmas paper, but I thought with the real red and the black lines that it had a great farm look to it. So that's perfect for my farm themed card that I have right here. Now this paper is actually free right now during Celebration, but hurry, Celebration ends September 30th in just a few days. So maybe you already have this paper in your stash and you've already earned it during Celebration, but if not, this paper came from the Peaceful Prints paper on page 8 in the Celebration catalog. So this paper features some lovely prints that are intended for Christmas. We've got reindeer, Christmas trees, snowflakes, this really lovely birch pattern. And we also have the red and black plaid pattern that I use for today's card. I've already cut this piece of paper down to get the piece that we're going to use on our card. On the back side, I have that same pattern, this time with snowflakes, and I have these other great plaid stripes, pine needle or like pine garland, really great prints that could be used for masculine cards, would be great for Christmas cards. You know, and this one even really isn't very Christmassy at all. You know, it's just green paper, so you could really use that for St. Patrick's Day or garden cards with lots of flowers. So great paper. Why not earn it free of charge? Any $50 purchase between now and September 30th will earn you that paper. Now, to get started stamping our farm animals, the most important thing is that we have to figure out the correct placement of where to stamp the farm animal so that it appears through our window. And you can see that in this version, I put the window off to the side, and in this one, I put it head on. And you have a choice of doing it whichever way you like. Let's take a look at the Give It a Whirl dies that are the star of today's show. First and foremost, I think I've already shown you this die. This is the die that we're going to use to cut the front panel of the card. Not only does it cut out your rectangle, it gives you really nice stitching detail around the edge. You get a finger notch for where the person is going to move the wheel. And you also get a hole in the center here, which is where we're going to put our brad so that the wheel will spin. This die is super helpful for making this spinner card. We have lots of great shapes and embellishments like hearts, clouds, and stars that can be used as part of your design. We also have some nice arrow dies that can help provide a visual cue to the recipient that they are meant to spin the card. And then we've got these windows, and this is what cuts out the shape. Here I use the third of the circle on my card. And so, but there's also an option to cut out a heart, a circle, or even a rectangle. This die, the wheel, is the mechanism that is actually going to spin and what people are running their finger across. And I should have mentioned this die. This die is a really great complement to this one. If you do decide to use the circle hole, you can make this circle and layer it on top of it to frame your circle on the card. I should have made a sample of that, but I didn't think of it. I did do quite a bit of the cutting prior to the video just to save us some time on the video. There's a lot to talk about. But I use this wheel die to cut out my circle. And if you can see, these bars in the center, they don't have any cutting mechanism on them. They're just flat pieces that brace the circle and allow for that center hole that makes the dot. So that, you know, there needed to be a mechanism to place that dot there in the center. But you can see that when you cut out your wheel, it will leave a faint impression on the wheel. I don't know if you can see that, but it leaves a faint embossed look on the wheel. That's actually a really good thing. It gives us a guidepost as to where we can stamp. So then I know that I want my image to be between these two lines and this arc. So one way that you could stamp your images is you could go ahead and use these small Post-it notes, and you could place the Post-it note right up to the edge of that impression. Let's go ahead and stamp maybe our pig. Got that guideline of the top arc. I stamp my pig, and then when I remove my Post-it notes, it takes away the hooves, but then I don't have any stamping in my other block. I wouldn't want the hoof to come over here, and then it would interrupt where I'm trying to put the cow or the ram. So this masking technique is one great way to get your animal in the area that you want. But another technique would be to cut yourself out an extra wheel on scratch paper. This is really just a piece of copy paper that I cut the wheel out of. And then I ran it back through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine 3 more times. And I basically placed this shape right over my wheel, being sure that the hole lined up with the center hole, ran it through, and then I cut that. And then I did it again for another pass and cut that. And then I ran it through for a third pass and cut this. And now this is my stencil. So I could actually put this down on my wheel, lining up the hole. I'm just going to put a Post-it note there to hold that in place. And now I can come in with my next animal and I can stamp it right on that template. And you'll notice when I lift that up, it takes away any of the excess that didn't fit there, right? And then I can turn my wheel and I can bring in my cow. Actually, I am going to mask this off. The cow is a little longer, and I want to make sure I don't get any cow on my other critters. And then I can just go ahead and stamp that in the window. So I did still need the masking for that. You can see I would have gotten some hoof on my pig if I hadn't done that. But the wheel also was a helpful guide, helping me to see the top edge. And if you're somebody maybe with low vision, this could be a real help in making sure you identify where that top edge is. So the template is not necessary, that's a bonus, but I do think that the masking technique at a very minimum on its own is critical to ensuring that you don't get any little hooves that carry over onto your next animals. So there's a good tip there. Let's go ahead and stamp our sentiment. The sentiment comes from Peekaboo Farm, Life is Better with You. And I'm going to use Smoky Slate to stamp my sentiment. Life is better with you. Perfect. Now, you'll notice that I had pre-cut this little rectangle here, and that came from the stitched rectangle dies. So this is a really great die set. You get tons of different sizes and shapes of rectangles, and I used this one for my sentiment. And I also, I'm gonna bring a card in here so that you can follow along. I also stamped this cute little bird on top of my sentiment. And I did that because the sentiment said, life is better with you. So it made me feel like you needed two, like the bird and the ram, or the bird and the cow, the bird and the pig. So that's why I brought this little guy in, and I kind of just stamped him amongst the letters. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and let these dry. You'll notice that I didn't color this right away. I continued stamping, and really my goal was to just let the Memento ink dry for a moment before I started coloring with my Stampin Blends. Sometimes if you start to color too soon, your blends will smear the ink a little bit. In order to make my flower arrangement, I used the welcoming window stamps and the coordinating dies. The plant pot is done with this stamp and this die right here. And I used retired ink called Terracotta Tile. If you don't have Terracotta Tile, you could actually maybe substitute Calypso Coral, would probably be a good match for kind of a terracotta clay pot. And for this, I use this die and this stamp set. And I stamped the leaves in garden green, and then I came back in with this stamp and I stamped again on the same piece of paper, and I brought in the Flirty Flamingo so that I could make my flowers here, and just like I said, cut that out with the die. So this was a really easy way for me to make a little greenery, which I thought was nice on the farm. I also used this fence piece that came from the sheep dies, also free during celebration with a $50 purchase. So I used this sheep die. And when I wanted to put the fence down on my card, it was just a little short for the width of the card. And so I thought that the flower pot was a great way to fill the width of the card and make it look like, you know, things that you would see on a farm. So I thought they were a great complement together. All right, so I think our Memento Tuxedo black ink is dry and that we're ready to start coloring. Before I do that, we need to stamp one more thing, and that's our horse. On the inside of the card, I actually also have a horse. So I'm gonna go ahead and stamp our horse. Almost forgot. Okay, so while the horse is drying, we can start with coloring our other elements. I have a whole bunch of colors here today. It took a lot of colors for me to make the card just the way I wanted. I have the combo, so I have both light and dark of Petal Pink, Crumb Cake, Flirty Flamingo, Smoky Slate, and I also have the Color Lifter. So lots of markers here in my arsenal today. Okay, I'm gonna start off with a light color. I'm gonna use the light Petal Pink to color in my bird. And I'm doing that lightly because I want you to be able to read the lettering underneath it, the width. So that was quick and easy. While I have those Petal Pink, I'm going to focus on the snouts or noses of the animals. So I'm going to start with the light Petal Pink on the ram. I think it's better if I use the brush side. This is a fairly sizable surface area. So this is light Petal Pink, and I'm doing the ram's face. And I'm just going to come in with the dark and outline the little tuft of wool and kind of on the outside of the face, just to add a little bit of 3D tone and maybe a little bit there around the nose. Now I'm also going to come in and do the nose of our cow, being careful not to fill in those two circles, the nostrils. I'm just going to go around those. And let's take a look at our pig. Okay, I used the dark one on our pig, and again being careful to avoid our nostrils. Now you could also bring in a little bit of Petal Pink here on the pig's ears. We're going to go back over that a little bit later, but just adding a little bit of accent there. And let's not forget that we have our horse on the inside. Do the nose of the horse in a lighter color as well. I think I like this better with the light Petal Pink like I just did. How about we go with the light Flirty Flamingo on our pig? And I'm going to start off by coloring the whole pig. I'm going to come back in maybe with some darker tones after, but I'm going to start off giving the pig the whole light. I'm going to go around the edges of the outline so I can get close to the edge. When I start to color faster, I like to not have to be too close to the edge. And I'm going to try to stay kind of light around the forehead. Just barely touching that. Trying to make that pig's face look three-dimensional by having lighter tones on what would be the foremost spot. So you see how the pig's face is just a little bit lighter there. And then I'm going to come in with the darker Flirty Flamingo and go back over some areas, trying to add a little bit of shading and dimension, maybe kind of around the edges of the pig's face, top of the head, just trying to, again, make this pig look more 3D, bring a little up into the ear there if I like. And in order to blend this line and keep it from looking really harsh, I'm going to come back over the area where I finished with the dark Flirty Flamingo and bring in the light there and kind of blend it all together so that the pig will sort of gradiate in terms of the depths of the tone. So I think I'd like just a little more up here in the ears. And I'm pretty happy with that now. Now let's come in and look at our cow. Now Smoky Slate can be a really dark marker color, so I'm going to use the light Smoky Slate on the cow, and with the small detail side, I'm going to do his horns and also the spot on his face. Then I'm going to come back with the brush side for this larger area for the bigger spot, as well as this ear. And I think that looks really great there. Now for our ram, we're going to use a combination of the dark and the light Smoky Slate. Let's start off with the light, and at first we're just going to color in the horns in their entirety. So I'm going to go over all of the area of horn. Not even worried about going over the black line. It's going to show through. Alcohol markers are really awesome for that. And now I'm going to come back and use the fine part of the dark Smoky Slate, and I'm just going to trace over these black lines on the horns, and this is going to add some depth of color. And then I'm going to come in with the fine, and I'm just going to put some little dots of color on this tuft of fur to try to give it some shading. And while I have the light, I'm also going to color in the ram's hooves. Well, look at that. I made a mistake. I forgot to stamp my stones for the horse. Since I forgot to put the stone on here, we're going to go ahead and toss this one aside, and we're going to re-stamp. First, we want to stamp our stone wall, and then we want to stamp our horse. Notice there's these two lines here, and the hooves line up with those openings. So the horse looks like he has his hooves right on the wall. That was light petal pink. And now I'm going to come in with the dark Smoky Slate at the bottom of each stone. So after you color in the dark Smoky Slate at the bottom edge of the stones, you're going to come in and fill in the rest of the stones using the brush end of the light Smoky Slate. Okay, so those stones have a great tonal effect. I just love that. Now I'm going to take a color lifter, and I'm just going to gently go over these little gray marks to lighten them up so they don't look like kind of the dots I made. Just soften them and adding a little shading there on the ram's fur tuft. And we need to color our horse. I'm going to use light crumb cake to color my horse. And up around the ears. Let's maybe get a little bit of pink in there too. Now, in order to give this horse some dimension, I'm going to come back around with the same light crumb cake. I'm going to do this a little different than the one I'm showing you. But I'm just going to come back around with the light around the edges and darken up the light crumb cake. Instead of using the soft suede, I actually think I'm going to try this with the dark crumb cake this time. And don't forget this part of the mane peeking out back there. I actually really like that. And I'm going to come back in for the horse's nose. Just add tone till you're happy with your horse. And now let's go ahead and I will do the hooves in soft suede. This is the light soft suede that I'm using here for the hooves. Actually, maybe I will bring a little into the center part of the mane. Oh, I kind of like that. Every time I do this, I play with it a little bit different. I think all three of my horses are just a little bit different. So when you're done and you like your animals, then you're finished with the coloring. We can go ahead and set all of these markers aside. And now really what we need to do is assembly. This card would be very fast if I hadn't done all the coloring. Honestly, the majority of the effort in this card is coloring and the prepping for the cut. Okay, so for the card front, I'm gonna put a washer behind this for protection and also just add a little dimension so that the spinny mechanism doesn't get caught on anything. What I did was I used the 1-inch circle punch and I just cut out a 1-inch circle. And I'm going to come in with my take your pick tool. You're wondering what this is, I bet. This is actually part of my stamp caddy. So when I originally got my black case, it came with all of these pieces that I needed to pop out so I could pop my blacks in. And I'm a frugal crafter. I don't know why I didn't call my business the Frugal Crafter, but I save everything, and so I had these in my drawer, and it just dawned on me, this is a great way for me to make the hole inside my circle. I can just put it on this piece of foam and then pop a hole in it with my take your pick tool. So now I've got a little hole there, who cares? It was extra waste from my stamp caddy. Okay, so before we can assemble our wheel, we're going to need to cut out our peekaboo hole on our DSP. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse those Post-it notes. I lined up the little frame here with the hole in the paper, and I'm going to run this through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Okay, so now that I've run it through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, which is behind me and you can't see, I'm just going to take this apart, and now I have a hole for my farm animals to peek through. So let's go ahead and assemble the wheel mechanism. We're going to use the front piece, put the wheel behind it, matching up the hole here. Bring our washer in, line that up, and then we're going to bring in the brad. Now on these versions you can see I used a red brad. These red brads are long retired. They came from this set of Bold Brights brads from quite a long time ago. I liked them because they blended in with the paper, but I thought maybe I would use these black brads that are available right now and just, you know, open those wings and press them down. While you want to open them, you don't want to squeeze them so tight that they stop your wheel from spinning. So give a good check, make sure that your wheel is still spinning as expected. So I'm going to go ahead and embellish the card front prior to putting on the dimensionals. I could do it the other way around, but I think it's a little bit easier sometimes when the card is not popped up. First I attached the white sentiment onto the gray strip. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on the card. You want to make sure you put that high enough that you leave room for your fence. I'm going to put my fence down. Again, I've got this great plaid paper to help me line up all my embellishments. And I just use Stampin' Seal for all of these little pieces. I didn't want to use dimensionals because I didn't want the card to get any thicker. I will be using dimensionals on the back of the red piece, so just in the interest of keeping it good for mailing. And I'm going to go ahead and put down my plants. Now you'll notice this greenery hangs off. That's okay. I'm still going to mount this onto the card. So even though it's hanging off of the red piece, it's still on the black. All right, now let's go ahead and use dimensionals so that we can attach the DSP to the back of the card. Remember that this wheel is going to be spinning, so wherever you put your dimensionals should be far away from the wheel. You want to stay up in the corners. And then down here, since we have more room, maybe we'll put one in the middle to try to help prevent some sag. We could also put one here and here to help support the card. Need to remove the paper backing from all of these dimensionals. Just using my take your pick tool to stab that and pull that off. And we're going to go ahead and place this down on our card base. Make sure your plant is still on the card front. There we go, excellent. And I need some Stampin' Seal for my horse. You could also add a sentiment to this horse card. I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for. I would say it might make a really cute anniversary card, but I just had my anniversary a few days ago and I made a custom card that looked just like my garden wedding. So I'm going to wait and add a sentiment later once I decide what I'm going to use this for. Lastly, we want to come in with our arrow, and I die cut these in advance. They're still stuck in the die. I'm going to use my take your pick tool to pop out an arrow. I'll leave the other one there for safekeeping for the next project. It's kind of nice that you get two at a time. And remove the adhesive paper, and this is a self-adhesive arrow. Remember how I did that was I took a scrap of paper and I attached an adhesive sheet onto the back of my cardstock before I ran it through with the arrow die. So now my arrow is self-sticking, so that's great. And now I can give it a whirl. How do you like that? So stinking cute. I can't stand it. All right, so how about one other quick sample, just so that you can see another idea. In this case, I used the Counting Sheep stamp set, again, that fence die. The sentiment came from Counting Sheep, and I made this one with the sheep for You're Amazing. So these are just so fun. I am super stoked about this Give It a Whirl die set. I can't wait to keep making more cards with this. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps me on YouTube, and I'd love it if you'd leave me a comment. Why not let me know which version of the card you like better? Do you like the Peekaboo Farm card? Or do you like the Counting Sheep card better? Would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you're interested in purchasing any of these products, visit the comments for a link to my online store, and you'll be able to purchase any of these stamp sets or these really great Give It a Whirl dies. I look forward to seeing what you're gonna make with these stamps and dies. I think I can see some very fun Valentines in my future. Thanks so much for watching. Until the next time. Bye.